Hi there, I'm Stacie Ysidro with Holistic Progressions over here at St. Pete Retreat in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I am here with one of my very special friends, Tim, and I have brought him here today to share with you some inspiring information and his experience that he's had along the way in this journey. So, Tim, thanks for coming out to play and sharing with everyone.
Thanks, Stacy. It's always so much fun to come out and share and play and learn with you.
Yay. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you want to share, and what actually started getting you on this path or taking this journey to a wholeness of yourself that actually includes sexuality and pleasure.
I think, like so many around the globe right now, as we kind of came into the last 3 years of life, it really was stark as we had to go inward within ourselves, as we all kind of went into our own safe spaces. And then we had to then find that inner solace. And then for many of us, that came with a lot of personal trauma and loss. And as I started to have to move into that space, I started to learn more and more that where on the outside surface, I had been a high functioning professional and able to engage in so many wonderful things and had such a full life. It was really a severed life where, in a culture that doesn't truly value an awareness and appreciation of all that we can gain from it and all the pleasures that can be had, I really was denying myself a gaze into a very real part of myself that I think is a part of all humans, and that is our deep desire and willingness and want to connect with ourselves and others in ways that are real and authentic that can really bring us joy and pleasure. And those can take many manifestations, and one of those happens to be sex and other acts. But I really found that I was incomplete as a human, and it really was having to look within and go within during the global pandemic that really brought some stark realities to me. And I had to think on those and figure out what paths I could take to do that. And I realized I needed a guide. I needed someone to help me, that I wasn't going to be able to do this work alone. And so it really started me with two journeys: one, to find out who the heck I am, and secondly, who it is that I could trust and want to work with to try to work down this path together, which led me to you.
Yay. Celebrations. I'm so glad it did. Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is the how you're out in life and we're, I don't know, it's almost like putting the face on or showing up in the exterior, and that there's a part of ourselves that doesn't really get to be explored or expressed when we're only living for the outside show of things. Like there's a piece of you that was kind of put away or dissected out of your wholeness.
Yeah, I think that is definitely an aspect of it, which is we have a projection to the world that we have. I also think that for many of us who have full lives, that full life fills our cups, and for many of us, it's cups that really are directed outwards to the service of others. And then that really doesn't allow us to think about, well, are we really taking care of ourselves? Are we well plenished and ready to go? And what have we really thought about what our needs are and how we could be in a better relationship to the world in a way that is truly um, that really fulfills and sustains us and ourselves. So there were two fronts to that. I found that I was out in the world doing the grind, and it was well worn grooves that I could just kind of grind through. And it made me feel as if my days were full because they were very full. But then when we kind of wrenched into a world where all of those grooves were gone, it really created this existential void. I think it was Viktor Frankl who called it the Sunday neurosis. Those people who, when they find themselves a little downtime, often find that they start to ponder what it is that they're even in life doing, and are they actually fulfillment in life? And that was coined in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, which were his accounts of the Holocaust and kind of the traumas he saw, and his form of psychotherapy that kind of came out of that. So I feel that that's kind of what hit me, was a neuroses of sorts, what the French call the ennui of life. What is life all about? And I feel that as people watch this out there in the world, that they can probably resonate with that. And this might turn others off. So if this isn't for you, then this is the time for you to switch the channel. But if this resonates with you, it's time to lean in a little bit closer and maybe learn a little bit here.
Yeah, I can relate to that almost. It's like an existential crisis almost. Like,
Yeah.
who am I? What is this for? Why are we here? What's actually going on? Or spiritual emergency, as Stan Groff when holotropic breathwork describes it,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a
That's how he
spiritual
describes it
emergency.
too.
Yeah. So that's great. Yeah, I think a lot of people have experienced that, especially during the pandemic, but even just at different parts of our life. I mean, I feel like I hit a new existential crisis, like, I don't know, every so often there's like a new layer to it. It's like an opportunity to go deeper in this spiral. So, so great. So then, seeking someone to be a guide, and then also figuring out yourself along the way were your two big deals there.
Yeah, they really were. I had done a lot of introspection and work on spiritual paths before, but in our traditional ways of thinking, we often subdivide and often shame an idea about bodily pleasure or certain areas that we can seek it out, which is really a schism in the world. So in all the mainstream tradition world traditions of religion or spirituality, there kind of is this division that's created. And one of the real challenges, I think, of those of us who aren't in a monastic order trying to live out our lives as celibate or some other sort of something is that we have to kind of rectify the fact that we have really real needs and desires, and some of those are going to be of the flesh. And that is a real challenge when we have a lot of dogma around our cultural teachings that say that that is something that we should deny ourselves. And a life of denial is not a life that I want to live any longer. And I think that far too many people deny themselves of the true outlets that they could have, and the sensuance of that. And that we can balance and interweave all of those things, I feel, as long as we can keep to some of the central tenets that we also find, which is equanimity, that balance between the two. Obviously, we can't go to complete hedonism potentially, or that might not work for everybody, but I'm not here to yuck someone's yum, or, the other one either. But if that works for, to be in a monastic order for you, good for you. Go enjoy your life. But for those of us really trying to do the grind of daily life and live in a world, especially in the Western culture, it's a real challenge that I think can cause a lot of destruction and destructive things for people and their relationships and the communities that they're in.
Yeah, thank you. It's like what we repress or push away ultimately starts to control us and starts to get bigger and more dramatic because we keep pushing it down and pushing it down. And so it will come out either unconsciously or consciously. And yeah, it's part of being a human being.
Yeah, a phrase that kind of keep coming up time and time again as I think through all this is that deprivation leads to desperation, and desperate men and women do really intense things out of that point. And so, as we deprive ourselves of really exploring and owning our own true senses of self in their totality, I feel that that can lead to some very dangerous outlets for people that ultimately can be destructive for them. Um, and there's lots of outlets that we can come from a full place of intentionality, which others might deem as being yucky or inappropriate. But when we come at it from a thoughtful place of feeding what we really want, um, that's something different, and that has intentionality around it, and it's a place of thoughtful contemplation about what it is that the person really wants for themselves, and that's an internal personal decision that only one person can make for themselves.
Yeah, that's a journey in and of itself. And we're going to do another video asking you about how you started figuring that out. But I really want to also highlight the point that you made about um, our culture and most of religion and our society almost demonizes pleasure, or moralizes pleasure. um, Hell, they even medicalize it sometimes. And there's like this idea that if we're going to be like spiritual and enlightened, that we need to like renounce the body and the body pleasures.
That's right.
And yeah, and the reality is, yeah, we're human beings, and we do have needs and desires, especially around pleasure. Our
Yep.
body is wired for pleasure. And speaking of sexual pleasure and fulfillment, that is actually an essential part of our mental, emotional, and even physical health and well-being. So I'm loving the idea that you were in this space of realizing, this is like a duality here. It's like a polarity. And how do we find that middle space to where I can be grounded and feel good about being in pleasure, and also, navigate life, without the shame and guilt of experiencing pleasure, or taking a journey and exploring what that means to you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel that the use of the term medical actually brings in an interesting side point here. We currently live in the US in an opioid crisis where people are using external substances to feed a endogenous system, a system that's just part of our brain and the dopamine systems, which we can evoke and actually kind of harness ourselves if we can actually acknowledge and find really well thought out, appropriate, sustainable pathways to feeding ourselves and that need for pleasure in our bodies, to have that pleasure pain duality in our brain where you can only experience pleasure because you know what pain feels, but you can only really feel the pain because you know what the pleasure is in life. And we can feed ourselves through interactions that are sustainable in life, and we don't have to bring in other substances. Um, Now, I do know that opioids might have a place as far as pain management for people who really need them. That's not what I'm trying to minimize. But uh, the overuse of these to feed this need for pleasure and tapping into these systems in the brain, we could find other outlets which are actually sustainable and naturally part of who we are as humans and how we've kind of evolved as a species to come out and interact with the world is one way to think about it. And so to deny us those pathways to use our bodies in ways of pleasure, to feed and get that, to use food in a way that is sustainable and well balanced to feed that as well. And these are all things that can form addictions, right? So we have sex addiction, if you want to say that. We have food addiction, if you want to say that. But finding a way to actually honestly acknowledge what we're getting out of something, what we want to achieve out of it, and how to make that sustainable for ourselves is probably the first path to finding a well balanced relationship for that. And as you and I have shared, I have an addict's mind. So there is a place where I say that there's certain substances that I won't touch, and I do it totalitarily, just like stay away from them. But I do feel that I don't want to live a life where I have to deny myself all of pleasure. And so I have to then seek out ways of having healthy outlets for that. So I don't find myself stumbling out of desperation into paths and substances that I know will feed a bad, dark side of myself that I don't want to feed any longer.
Yeah, the substance use and misuse is absolutely a huge thing within sexuality. And I think a lot of people do use substances to either, yeah, mask pain, whether it is an emotional or mental pain body or a physical pain body, or it is that we're seeking a pleasure. And yes, everyone's body responds differently and is a different chemistry, but having an awareness of how your body and mind and spirit interact with those chemicals that we ingest, because people are going to use substances. I mean, caffeine, sugar, all of the things. So yeah, what I'm hearing you say is you've gotten a really good self-awareness around what brings you pleasure and what brings you pain, and what opens a pathway for you and what closes it.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, because I can't speak for anybody else who lives a narrative or lived truth, that's been a key to the success that we've helped to cultivate through our work together, is me having that awareness of what my intentions are, what brings me pleasure, and pathways that are going to be sustainable for allowing that to happen in a way that is within alignment of the full reality of life that I want to live interpersonally and also intrapersonally within myself and in my relationships to others who I value and want in my life. Those are key to me.
Mm. I love this. Thank you. So good. So we're moving into um, what were your needle movers. So we're going to pause this video because we know your attention span is short, and we're going to hop on another one and talk about what are the big top 3 things that really helped you go from this space of kind of feeling in that duality and searching for that level of equanimity and really integrating sexuality and pleasure into the wholeness of who you are. So we invite you to come with us on this next journey on our next video. So we will see you back here momentarily.